Hey guys, so today I want to talk about a book called Clarity. It's a Regency romance in a series. I received an ARC copy. I believe the author is Sydney. Very good Regency romance book. Um, it follows the Diamond Children. The series follows the Diamond Children. So the first book is about Clarity Diamond, the oldest daughter of the family. She is kind of a wild child, rambunctious. The book starts off with kind of like a memory prologue type thing where it shows her and her best friend Alex getting into some mischief at her family's country home. The next time we see Clarity, her and her family is at a ball, and there is rumors that her childhood friend Alex is going to be coming out to society. Something that we are find out shortly is that Clarity and her family haven't seen Alex since his parents' accident, and they died. He's about 10 or 12, and that was the last time they saw him. They never saw him. He never came back to visit them after that. He went to Eton College, or Eton School, and then he went off to Oxford for college and or university as they call it over there. And so they hadn't seen him. And Clarity, was excited because Alex and her had been very, very close, been very good friends, and so she was excited to get to see him. Except that when she finally did, it was super awkward. Alex was not what Clarity had remembered him being. Her fun-loving, prank-loving friend was gone, and in his place was this serious man who didn't know how to joke and didn't smile, and you get an insight into Alex's mind, whereas like it's even mentioned that the whole reason he's coming out into society is to find a wife, and that previously he had had a mistress and she had been very discreet, and when he no longer required her services anymore because he was going to have a wife, they had parted amicably. Like, what? A mistress? Really, dude? And parted amicably? It just sounded like he's just kind of weird. There are some deep-seated issues for Alex. He feels responsible for his parents' death. He wasn't, and you get the idea, there's like a sense of where like he feels like he caused their death. And so I spent half the book thinking, oh, well, did Alex like play a prank and it caused something to happen to the carriage and that's what caused the accident? But it's not anything like that, actually. Alex is raised by his aunt after his brother's sister, or his father's sister, after the carriage accident, and she is one of those people who everybody has to act a certain way, and if you want a wife, she has to be a certain person and she has to act this way, and you don't want an unruly wife and you want one that you can control, and so it's very obvious that a lot of his demeanors and the reason he's so serious and all that stuff comes from his aunt. Him and Clarity do not get along. Like, this new version of Alex is very awkward. He doesn't like the way that, Clarity laughs out loud, and she's not very ladylike, and she doesn't act the way that he thinks a woman in her position should act. And so when it comes time for him to consider women for him to marry, she is not on his list. Not all. Now, her sister Purity is. And he actually says that. Like, he goes to their house, calls on them, specifically, he's there to call on Purity, and mentions that Purity is the one that he's there for, that Clarity is not who he's looking for, and she's offended. I mean, I would be offended too. This is someone who was her best friend as a child, and now he wants nothing to do with her because he doesn't like the way she is. It was super weird. And that was mainly his aunt's influence. Like, they discussed it beforehand, and she was like, oh, well, but that Clarity, she's just not, no. So he wants to make a offer to court Purity, and Purity straight up says no. She's like, I don't think that I'm the one for you. I'm not interested. Even though Purity is prim and proper and more subdued than her older sister, she still enjoys a good-natured, good-humored person, and Alex just doesn't seem like that. So Purity makes a suggestion that Clarity helps Alex come out to society and find a bride for himself. That's kind of rejected out of hand. Like, Clarity's straight up like, well, he's an old stick in the mud, and I don't feel like having to put up with that. And they kind of leave the meeting. It's a little awkward. Like, Clarity kind of offers him some insight, and Alex isn't sure if he wants to accept her help. And then as it progresses through the different the balls and parties that they go to, you see that Alex is drawn to a young lady, Elizabeth Bramble, because she's prim and proper and exactly what a wife should be that he's looking for according to his aunt. And Clarity has several suitors. It's her second or third season out. It's her and Purity out together. She has several suitors who are interested in her. Her parents decide to host a week-long party at their country estate. Actually, it's more like her mom decides to host, and her dad just kind of like has to go along with it. And they invite Alex. Well, Alex's aunt decides that Miss Bramble's going to go with them. And so when they show up, and Clary didn't think he was going to accept. Like, she was like, oh, Alex wants nothing to do with us. He doesn't like us anymore. Like, that's just the impression she gets from him because of the way he acts. And so when he shows up with his aunt and Miss Bramble. And Clarity is just like, you've got to be kidding me, dude. Like, what are you doing? And so it kind of turns into one of those things where they spend the week and there's fun and they're doing all kinds, and memories start to come back for Alex as he starts to remember the fun that he had with the diamonds and how much he enjoyed being around them and being there. And they go fishing, and he loses a fishing pole, and they go for walks, and he shows Miss Bramble around the estate because he practically grew up at that estate. Clarity mentions to him several times that he should talk to her mother because their mothers were great friends. And one of the running jokes that their mothers had was them eventually getting married, him and Clarity. And of course, in Clarity's mind, she's like, well, that's silly. That's never going to happen. There is a point at a party, and I can't remember if this was a party. I believe it was a party before the week-long party at the estate, where him and Clarity end up kissing in the garden, and it's such a shock because it's such a good kiss, and she can't stop thinking about it, and she tries because that the other gentlemen that are actually interested in her are very nice gentlemen, but once having kissed Alex, that she can't think of anybody else. So it comes to a head at the party at her parents' estate. The one of the gentlemen that's there asks for her hand because he's been courting her, and she has to turn him down. And Alex is actually kind of jealous because, like, he's starting to realize that he has feelings for her. And that kind of turns into, they go for a walk, and she climbs a tree and gets him to climb the tree with her. And of course they fall at some point, and she lands on top of him, and they're laughing and having fun. And then his aunt shows up with Miss Bramble, and they have to kind of explain themselves, and things kind of fall apart from there. Like, Clarity starts to realize that she has feelings for her one-time best friend, and that seeing him truly loosen up and truly be happy, and he talks to her mother, and they kind of reconnect over memories of his parents, and but seeing him truly loosen up and really be the boy that she remembers really has her falling for him, and he starts to realize that Clarity brings a life to his life, like a light to his life that he was missing. And it eventually comes to a point where they can't deny their feelings for each other. There is a maze at one of the parties, and it kind of turns into them talking, and I believe they share another kiss. And it turns into one of these things where he eventually has to tell Miss Bramble that it's just not going to work between them, that there's just nothing to be done. He doesn't have the feelings for her that he has for Clarity, and he does end up marrying Clarity. That's when the problems arise. They move into the house in London, and the biggest issue with this, and I mean, I pegged it as soon as this happened. They moved into the house, and the aunt didn't move out. The aunt has been living in this house for years. Like, this is the house that she took over after her brother and her sister-in-law died. And she's widowed. She was widowed very young. Her husband died at a very young age, and she never remarried. And so after her brother and her sister-in-law died, she moved into this house, and she never left. And you kind of see it before he gets married. Alex will tell the butler to do something or the maid to do something, and they'll like look to his aunt first to confirm with her that they can do it before they actually do it. And it's like, he's the lord of the house, not her. Like, what are you guys doing? And that wasn't a problem for him because she ran the house. But when Clarity showed up, and mind you, Clarity knows how to run a party, how to run a house. Her mother has trained her on how to do all. She knows how to be a lady. She knows how to be a mistress, like a wife. She knows these things. So she gets moved in, and immediately there's already problems. There's no room for her to have her own place. Like, typically there's a parlor for the wife to, greet people. She has her own sitting room. Well, the aunt has taken over that. So the aunt has her own sitting room, and that's where she handles business. Clarity asks about the household accounts. Well, the aunt does those. And the more Clarity pushes, the more the aunt pushes back. So Clarity decides that one of the first things she wants to do is have a dinner party at the house, because she's helped her mother. She's done dinner parties for years by herself and knows what she's doing. And so she goes to start organizing this dinner party, and from the start, things fall apart. She did the invitations, and when she did the wax seal on the invitations, she didn't do them in the correct color according to the aunt. She did it in blue, which was later explained that blue was like her color for like the diamonds, and the aunt had insisted that it needed to be in green, so the aunt redid all of her invitations and then sent invitations to people that were not on, like, completely changed her guest list. Changed her invitations, didn't tell her, told Alex, who didn't think it was a big deal. He thought that his aunt was being helpful. Changed where the meat came from. Just made so many subtle little changes to the party that by the time it was done, the party was awful. The wrong people were there. People got mad at each other. It ended up, nobody liked the way that Clarity had set up the dinner, because she had wanted to do something like what Queen Victoria had done, I guess, apparently the previous year, where she had, like, people would get up and get meats from the table and, like, self-serve themselves. And it was supposed to be cute and kitschy and kind of, different. And the people the aunt had invited didn't like it. And so it became a point of contention, and the aunt basically used that to be like, well, Clarity's not ready to run a household. Like, she doesn't know what she's doing. Look what she's doing here. And Clarity was so upset and so depressed about it that she decided, fine, I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to do anything. She wants to handle it. She can handle the household, and she starts to withdraw from even asking to do anything. And it's the same thing that it was with Alex. Anytime she asked the butler something, he has to go to the aunt. She asked the maid something, she goes to the aunt. She wanted to make changes to the house and, like, update it, because it hadn't been updated since his parents had lived there. And the aunt canceled everything. She had to go through the aunt to get flowers delivered to the house, which was something that his mother had done on a regular basis before she died. It was just ridiculous, the hoops this woman had to jump through to even try to be the lord in her own house. And things get even harder when she gets pregnant. And that's where it gets even harder, because then Alex, like, and he's still waking up from nightmares. Like, he still has nightmares of his parents' carriage accident. And Clarity gets pregnant, and now in his nightmares, Clarity's in the carriage, and Clarity's gonna die, and the baby's gonna die, and he gets controlling. Oh my gosh. He gets so mad at her. She goes to her mother's and to visit her mother and her sister. And they decide that they're going to go shopping because the one room that Clarity has full control over is the baby's nursery. And he tells her she can do whatever she wants. Well, then because of his nightmares, he doesn't want her to go by herself. So he decides he's going to go with her to go to these shops. Well, she didn't get to spend as much time as she wanted because he was kind of rushing her along. So when she went to her mother's, then her and her mother decided they were going to go get ice cream, and then they were going to go back to the shop so she could make sure she got what she wanted. And when she got home, he was freaking out. Where were you? Why were you? It was she was frustrated. Another big point of contention was the dining table. He sat at the head of the table. His aunt was sitting in her spot. And, like, she didn't know how to move the aunt without making a big deal about it. Like, it was really hard for her to figure out how to navigate this woman, right? So, then they get into it. There's a robber who's going from house to house, and he's robbing people. And they hear a sound one night. He goes down to see what it is. She follows, gets into the room. There's a gunshot, and he has shot the intruder. Well, it turns out that the intruder is one of the men that she had hired to work on the house, to work on the nursery. And so, of course, that makes him really angry, and he starts yelling at her about that. And it just kind of divulges from there. Like, it just, he goes somewhere. When he comes back, she's gone. And he's like, what do you mean she's gone? Oh, she went to her parents. So he goes to her parents to get her back. And her parents tell him, nope. Her dad basically looks at him and says, so you're going to drag my daughter out of here? And in all honesty, because of the way that the times were back then, technically she was his. She belonged to him, and he could demand her to come home. And this is the one part where Alex was smart. He realized that he had overstepped, that he had let his fears take over. And so he kind of backed off. Unfortunately for him, Clarity wasn't going to come home. Her and Purity and Alec, her brother, all go to their country estate where they decide to stay for a while and just kind of relax and de-stress. And she honestly has no idea if she ever wants to go home to him. She's like, I don't feel loved. I don't feel like he cares about me. I feel suffocated. I'm not the lady in my own house. And he finally gets his head on straight. And he talks to Clarity's mom, and she says, Clarity knows how to have dinner parties. Clarity knows how to do this, how to do that. She goes, if you want to see the real Clarity and see what she can do, go look in the one room in the house that she's had full control over. And so when he goes into the nursery, his mind is blown. It's beautiful. It's exactly what he thought she wanted to decorate the house as. And that's when he realizes that his aunt has been having all of this control, and he has not been showing Clarity the respect that she deserves. And so he packs up and he rides off to this country estate. And of course, it's so weird. Like, there's a point where so there's a lady in town. They call her a gypsy. Like, she has gypsy blood. She's a seer, and she says that she can only, like, vaguely see things. And during the week-long party that they had there, she had made a prediction that Clarity's husband was in the room. And so it could have been any one of the gentlemen that was there that was interested in Clarity, but it ended up being Alex. And so she's also the midwife. So she's there, checking on Clarity because she's getting close to her time. And she tells Clarity that she needs to reconcile with her husband and that she can't leave it like this. And well, when Alex is on his way to the country estate, he comes upon Clarity in a carriage getting ready to give birth in the carriage. Like, woman, what are you doing? So he takes her back, he sends the carriage driver to get the midwife, and he takes her back to the house, and she has the baby, and things kind of start to, like, settle down, and they get to reconcile and talk. And he realizes that he was wrong in not making it very clear that she was the woman of the house. And so then she tells him, she says, I'm going I'm going to make my mark. She was like, but I need your full support. She said, it does not matter what I do. I need you to support me. And he says, okay, that's what I should have been doing from the beginning. He explains to her his fears about the carriage ride. His aunt has a heart-to-heart to him before he comes to get Clarity. It comes out, the reason his parents were in that carriage, they were going to check out Eton. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it. They're going to check out Eton because his aunt had suggested that they send him to Eton because he was so rambunctious and wild, and his parents did not want to, but they went to appease her. And all this time, he had thought that his parents had thought he was bad, and that's why they were going to send him to Eton. And then it turned out that it had nothing to do with him at all. And so him and his aunt, she apologized. She told him she didn't really know how to raise a child, that she did the best that she could, that, she felt guilty. He did ask her about the diamonds and why she wouldn't let him go see them again. And she claimed that she kept him away because she didn't want the memory of his parents to hurt Lady Diamond. And of course, Lady Diamond later protested that would not have ever been the case. And Lady Diamond doesn't like the aunt, like they don't get along. And she was like that never would have been the case whatsoever. And so it kind of comes out that really the aunt had been like a blockage to all of this. And she did her best, but her best was, not good enough for the most part. I mean, he didn't die as a child, but there wasn't a whole lot of love there. And so when they get back from the country estate, Clarity has to establish herself as the lady. And so the first thing she does, she talks to the maid and she wants to make some changes, and the maid immediately goes to the aunt. And Clarity's had enough, and she takes one look at that maid and she tells her that if she cannot follow her and do as Clarity says, she's fired. And the aunt, oh my gosh, you can't do that. Da, da, da. And you can't hire her. She's a good maid. And she goes, then she's going to do what I tell her to. I am the lady in this house. And that's when she demands that the accounts be turned over. And then she takes the aunt's place at the head of the table. And she sits down and the aunt's just like, I don't know what to do. And the footmen are completely confused because Clarity's in the aunt's spot. It totally throws everybody off. And they eventually start to establish a new routine in her. And the aunt finally decides that, well, maybe I shouldn't be living here anymore. And she's got a gentleman friend who she invites to all of her parties and her dinner parties because he's a good friend. And Clarity goes ahead and throws her own dinner party the way she wanted to. And it goes off without a hitch, and the aunt just kind of sits in the corner and grumbles about it, but there's nothing she can do because Clarity has taken over. And so if the aunt does eventually end up marrying this gentleman friend of hers, and things kind of settle down to where Clarity has her husband and her child, and things are the way that she wanted them to be, the way that they're supposed to be. And it gets tied up in a neat, cute little bow. And I'm just like, this was adorable. I love this. I would love to read the second book. Cannot wait to read about Purity. The seer did make a comment about Purity, that she's going to have to be open-minded when it comes to her suitor and her husband. And so I'm kind of interested to see what happens there because that just sounds exciting. But yeah, Clarity, if you are looking for a good Regency romance. Happy reading!